Another 30 sailors tested positive for COVID-19. 4,000 sailors and family members isolated at the camp. Total number of COVID-19 patients in Sri Lanka exceeds 400. Police officer arrested with narcotics. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says threat is the virus, not the people.
A very good evening and a warm welcome to Primetime News on TV1. I'm Zinat Musafa. Take a look at your top story for today. Now, the number of COVID-19 confirmed cases across the island has risen to 416. 48 new cases have been confirmed so far today. 11 people tested positive for COVID-19 today. Of the total, 298 patients remain as active cases and are continuing to undergo medical treatment. 109 people have recovered so far.
දිනේදී ශ්‍රී ලංකා නාවික හමුදාවේ වැලිසර කඳවුරේදී 30 දෙනෙකු ආසාදනය වී තිබු බවට අපි තහවුරු කරන ලැබුවා. විශාල පරීක්ෂණ ප්‍රමාණයක් අද දිනෙත් කරනු ලැබුවා.
It was confirmed that 30 at the naval camp in Valisara were tested positive for COVID-19. We carried out a lot of tests today. Another 30 people were tested positive. Therefore, 60 patients have been detected at the naval camp in Valisara. We are making arrangements to isolate the camp and subject those who are there for quarantine. The Health Ministry has made arrangements to conduct PCR tests for those who made contact with these people. All those who have been associated with these sailors and gone on leave have been ordered to report back to the Valisara Navy camp immediately. Their families have been subjected to quarantine as well. We have received information that people living in different areas are panicking due to this. We assure you that you shouldn't worry about it.
ඔවුන් ඉන්න ප්‍රදේශවල මේ සඳහා යම් කිසි කැළඹීමකට ලක් වෙලා තිබෙනවා කියලා සියලු දෙනාම රැගෙන ඇවි තිබෙන බැවින් ඒ ගැන කිසිදු කලබලයකටපත් නොවිය යුතු බවත් මේ අනුව ඉතාමත් කාරුණිකව දන්වා සිටිනු ලබනවා.
Entering or leaving 4 villages which fall under the Uhana and Damana divisional areas and had been visited by some Navy personnel from the Valisara Navy camp have been restricted until further notice. These restrictions have been imposed in the villages of Rajavava, Madavalalanda, Pahalalanda and Navagiriya. Residents of these areas were allowed to leave their homes only for essential needs. PCR tests were carried out on 2 drivers and 2 assistants who had come into contact with an infected Navy officer attached to the Valisara Navy camp while he had been returning from Polonnaruwa. 4 members of their families have been sent to the Punani quarantine centre while steps were taken to disinfect houses in the vicinity of their homes in the Hingurakkoda area. 12 villages which come under the Lankapura Divisional Secretariat in the Polonnaruwa district have been declared as isolated areas. Meanwhile, a vendor who had sold fruits to the infected Navy officer near the Polonnaruwa clock tower had also been sent for quarantine. The area was disinfected this morning. The Variapala Pradeshiya Sabha has been temporarily closed down as an employee at the local authority had resided in the vicinity of the infected Navy officer. Meanwhile, the wife and child of a Navy officer attached to the Valisara Navy camp who had contracted the disease has been admitted to the Kurunagala Teaching Hospital. Our correspondent reported that families living in the vicinity of the suspected patient's residence in Kurunagala have been instructed to undergo self-quarantine. Meanwhile, 7 families in Samanmawatha in Horamulla, Rakwana were also instructed to undergo self-quarantine today. The eye clinic at the Anuradhapura Teaching Hospital was disinfected after being closed off temporarily. This was after a Navy officer from the Velikanda Navy camp had arrived at the hospital to visit his child. A Navy officer has been admitted to the Anuradhapura hospital after he had returned to his home in the Rambava area in Anuradhapura. Meanwhile, 7 families in the Talavegama area in Mahiyangania have been subjected to self-quarantine. This was because a relative of an army officer who had stayed at the residence of a Navy personnel attached to the Valisara Navy camp had been living in this area. PCR tests were carried out on 5 Navy officers who had returned from the Valisara Navy camp to their homes in Galle. Meanwhile, the governor's office in the central province was also closed down temporarily. This was after an employee at the office had come into contact with a Navy officer at the Valisara Navy camp. The curfew, which will be imposed at 8 p.m. today, will be in effect until 5 a.m. tomorrow throughout the country. Travelling between districts had been prohibited. We will be conducting inquiries at roadblocks. We wish to remind the public that the lifting of the curfew will depend on how much the people extend their support and fulfill their responsibility. Therefore, kindly abide by the curfew regulations.
සහයෝගය වගේම ඔබගේ යුතුයකම වගකීම ඉටු කිරීම මත එනිසා නිරන්තරයෙන්ම නිරෝධායන ඇදිරි නීති රීතීන් වලට ගරු කරන්න
Meanwhile, PCR tests were carried out in Bandaranayake Mawathe in Colombo once again today. Of the 142 tests that took place yesterday, it was confirmed that 5 people had contracted the disease. Close to 150 PCR tests took place today.
The 123 Watta, from where 5 patients were reported yesterday, had a total of 23 patients there. There was also a 6-month-old child among them. Houses in Bandaranayake Mawathe and Nagalam Vidya were disinfected today.
Meanwhile, a public health inspector in Makula and members of his family were quarantined in their residence.
11 people tested positive for the virus today. They were undergoing quarantine at Bandaranayake Mawathe and the area surrounding it. Yesterday, we conducted a record number of PCR tests. We carried out 1,142 tests. This is our maximum capacity at the moment. With the assistance of the ADB, we hope to develop a laboratory which had been in a dilapidated state in the Mullaria area. This laboratory alone will be able to conduct 1,000 tests.
PCR පරීක්ෂණ
As a government, we have taken all possible steps such as conducting PCR tests, implementing the quarantine procedure and developing facilities at hospitals which are used to treat patients. However, during this curfew period, one person in Bandaranayake Mawathe had concealed the illness and had transmitted this disease to the others. They had ignored the curfew regulations which were in place. Several people in Sudwala area have been infected due to the irresponsible conduct of a patient. The disease can spread among hundreds due to the irresponsible conduct of one. Therefore, we request the general public to fulfill their responsibilities.
සියලු දෙනාගේ ඔබේ වගකීම ඉටු කරන්න.
The Palliagudi fish market that was temporarily closed due to the prevailing situation in the country will resume operations tomorrow for wholesale traders.
Approximately 500 individuals who were employed at the market were subjected to PCR tests. We received the results of the tests this morning. No one tested positive. Therefore, we decided to resume operations at the market tomorrow. We thank the Health Ministry for all their support. If there is anyone who is not willing to adhere to the health guidelines specified by health authorities, we urge them to not come to the market. The 500 individuals who underwent PCR tests tested negative. There was no virus transmission taking place inside the market. However, we must be careful as this situation might change by tomorrow. We must practice social distancing to ensure we are all safe. Wearing a face mask is also very important. We must wear a mask that would cover the nose and mouth completely.
අපි පළඳින්න ඕනි නාසය සහ මුඛය සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ආවරණය වෙන විදියට.
Intelligence personnel attached to the Hanguranketha police arrested a police officer last night. The reason for the arrest was transporting a haul of drugs.
Intelligence officers attached to the police had seized 42 kilograms of narcotics which were concealed in the motorcycle of the suspect, who is also a police officer. Police noted that the suspect was attached to the Navagamua police station. Do you know the importance of this emblem? The reason for the survival of my family is this emblem. You are using this uniform, which is worn with respect, to distribute narcotics in Hanguranketha.
Heroin ගෑනලා අඟුරංගෙත බෙදෙනවා. එහෙනම් මන්ද ගෙනාවේ? බයිසිකල් යාව කවුද? බයිසිකල් එනම් මම. එතකොට බයිසිකල් එතෝ තිබ්බමාද? අපිට තිබ්බේ නෑනේ. අපි දැන් යමු. ඒ ඉතුරු ටික අපි.
Was it us who kept these? We will take you to the police and produce you to the OIC for necessary action. Let's see how much money you have.
හරිනේ. දැන් අපි බලමු සල්ලි කීයක් තියෙනවද කියලා. මහත් මේක ගන්න. මේ මාතේ බලන්නේ සල්ලි ගන්නකො. ඇත්ත කියන්නේ නැතුව මේ දැන් මායි.
There is no point in lying to us. Don't try to act innocent. Tell us the truth. Were these drugs brought by us? We pump petrol to our motorcycles for 100 rupees at our own expenses. We pump petrol in the morning and commence duties amidst several difficulties. He has 28,500 rupees. We will take you with this bag to the police station.
නේද? සම්බන්ධ අපි දැන් යන්නේ පයින් පල්ලෙහාට. එතකොට මම වෙනස් වෙන්න දෙන්නේ සැකකාරකම් කියන බඩියක්. නේ? අපි යමු. ආයි මේව ගලවන්න යනවා. හෑන්ඩ්කප් ගලවන්නේ ආයි ස්ථානෙ ගිහලා.
The suspect is to be produced to the Valapane Magistrates Court for further action.
Will the National Election Commission have the required funds to conduct the election amidst the situation surrounding COVID-19? The chairman of the National Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapriya, had this to say.
තන්විත ප්‍රකාශ කරා මේ මැතිවරණ කටයුතු සඳහා සමහර වෙලාවට මුදල් ප්‍රතිපාදන ප්‍රමාණවත් නැහැ.
මුදල් නම් දැන් අවුලක් නැහැ. මේ අපිට මේ මාර්තු දෙවනිදා කිව්වා මුදල් ඕන තරම් දෙන්නම් කියලා.
We do not have a problem regarding the funds for the election now. On the 2nd of March, we were told that we would be given as much as we want for the election. Democracy is very expensive. In certain countries, people have sacrificed their blood, sweat and tears and undergone hardships to win democracy and equality. Therefore, we will have to spend money to protect this.
We're crossing over for a short commercial break. Stay tuned for more news.
රජය විසින් නිර්දේශ කර ඇති මූල්‍යමය සහන පිළිබඳ වැඩි විස්තර සඳහා ආචාර්ය බැංකුවේ විශේෂිත ඇමතුම් මධ්‍යස්ථානය හා සම්බන්ධ වන්න 0112 481 356 0112 421 501 0112 326 130 0112 392 307 අමතන්න.
Welcome back to the news. Let's take a look at some of the views expressed on reconvening Parliament by several political representatives.
These were the sentiments expressed by the Sri Lanka Freedom Party.
ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් බවට පත් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද ඊට පස්සේ විපක්ෂයෙන් කියන්න පුළුවන් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ බලය නැතුව.
This may lead to a major issue. The opposition can claim that the president cannot approve state expenditure without parliamentary approval. No matter what we say, a parliament is needed at present. The United National Party has resumed their attempts to destabilize this country once again. The argument is that parliament should be reconvened. Almost 6.9 million citizens voted for Gotabaya Rajapaksa to bring power to a new parliament, not to bring back the previous UNP-led government.
UNP එක නැවත ගේන්න නෙමෙයි අලුත් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවක් ගේන්න. අන්න එතෙන්ට අපි මේ රට තල්ලු කළ යුතුයි.
Meanwhile, members of the National People's Power Party expressed the following views on reconvening parliament.
එතකොට මේක තුල නැවත අලුත් බෙදීමකට රට ලක් වෙනවා. ඒ බෙදීම කරන්න එපා මේ.
The country will experience a downfall as a result of this situation. Do not allow this to happen. It is the President's responsibility and duty to seek a Supreme Court determination on what should be done regarding this. We can respectfully abide by the court ruling.
නමලා ඊට අදාළව කටයුතු කරන්න පුළුවන්කම තිබෙනවා.
නමුත් මේ වසංගතයත් එක්ක රටේ ආර්ථිකය පිළිබඳව රටේ ආර්ථිකයේ ඊළඟට මුහුණ දෙන අභියෝගයන් පිළිබඳව ජනතාවට අවබෝධයක් නැහැ, දැනුවත් වීමක් නැහැ.
The people have not been made aware of the economic challenges that the country is facing during this pandemic. Neither we nor the government knows as to why the parliament is not being convened to take decisions regarding financial matters. We wish to ask the government as to how much foreign aid has been received by the country. How much have we received as loans? The government has obtained millions from the World Bank and the European Union. The US, China and India have also granted financial assistance. How much has been spent by the government? How much of these funds have been allocated to provide relief and to stem the spread of the virus? How much has been spent on medical supplies, patients and the quarantine process? No one knows about this. We need a daily report on this.
තත්ත්වය පිළිබඳව ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය පිළිබඳව මූල්‍ය තත්ත්වය පිළිබඳව මේ ලැබිච්ච ආධාර වලට මොකද වෙන්නේ කියන එක පිළිබඳවත් මම හිතන්නේ දෛනික වාර්තාවක් අවශ්‍යයි.
Transparency International Sri Lanka has written to the National Election Commission outlining certain key matters which should be taken into consideration concerning the general election.
In a letter sent to the National Election Commission yesterday, TISL raised concerns on the date of the election, which has been fixed for the 20th of June, citing that it could be inconsistent with Article 70, subsection 5 of the Constitution. The anti-corruption body said, and I quote, "This in turn could call to question the legitimacy of both the election and the ensuing result," unquote. The anti-corruption body in its letter further said that the Commission should update its circular on the abuse of state resources, considering the manner in which candidates can take part in relief programs during the campaign period. TISL said, and I quote, "We believe that the current circular issued on the 3rd of March 2020 on state resources abuse is inadequate for these exceptional times," unquote. The letter further noted that there will be an unavoidable impact on the observers at the upcoming election, paving the way for a likely increase in election violations. Accordingly, TISL added that this further reinforces the need to update the circular to ensure public officials and the general public are equipped to be ever more vigilant.
World Health Organization Special Envoy for COVID-19, David Nabarro, says in order to combat COVID-19, society at large must adapt and learn to live with the virus. He made these remarks on BBC's Hard Talk. Lankans to lose their modes of income, causing them to suffer in silence with no one to lend an ear to their plight. In a situation where those who provide relief to the helpless are also suffering, what sort of fate would befall a person who does not even have a roof above their heads? Now, this report is about one such family.
This is the Galkatigedara village in Narammala. Although the village of Galkatigedara is surrounded by an aesthetically pleasing scenery, the story of Maheshika and her family is an unpleasant one. Maheshika had constructed this miniature hut utilizing any sort of material she could locate, such as used cloth and worn-out tires and tins, on a plot of land given to her by a villager. She lived in this hut with her differently abled husband and her toddler, depending on no one to live their lives. She looked after her family through the income she earned by selling lottery tickets. However, following the COVID-19 outbreak in the country, she lost her sole mode of income. The gale winds, accompanied by heavy rainfall which swept across the village yesterday, added to Maheshika's woes when it destroyed the hut she calls a home.
Due to
the coronavirus, I do not get any lottery tickets to sell. It has been nearly 3 months now. The development board gave me 2,500 rupees over 2 months ago. I need milk powder to feed my children. He also eats biscuits. I spend the last 200 rupees in my possession on a 3-wheeler to go and purchase goods. I would like to request everyone to help me rebuild my house.
The empathetic souls in our country will never let strong-willed people such as Maheshika be dragged down by life. Maheshika and her family remain hopeful of receiving any sort of support to rebuild their lives.
More views were expressed in the political arena with regard to the election that is scheduled to take place on the 20th of June.
These were the sentiments expressed by the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna. If one is attempting to reconvene parliament, it is an attempt to weaken and destabilize the country. We will not allow this. They do not have the legal capacity to do this. Once a country is destabilized, the Election Commission has the power to hold elections. There is no parliament to reconvene. If the previous parliament is to be reconvened, only the president has the powers to do so. We are aware that the former speaker is attempting to initiate such a decision that goes beyond the legal framework. Their ulterior motive is to hinder parliamentary operations using their majority powers. There is an attempt to reunite the divided party. The powers are now vested with the Election Commission, not the parliament.
There
is no requirement to hold elections in every electorate. The chairman of the Elections Commission and the National Elections Commission can act according to the Elections Act. The government has no urgency to hold the election. We are already in power. It is the opposition that has the problem. I am not sure under what basis the chairman of the Elections Commission decided to set a date for the election. This is not clarified through the constitution. However, we all expect the country to return to normalcy by the 20th of June. The Samagi Jana Balavegya expressed these views. We are not afraid of the election. We are afraid of death. We are afraid of an election called by death. Around 5 million people in this country will go to vote with face covers on. A face cover essentially means cover your face and vote. Can we go for an election of that nature? Can the people of this country really go for an election at this point? This is the election of death itself, and I hope the Elections Commission doesn't stick its head out for it. The Elections Commission needs to think about the people. Also, if every legal luminary is saying that Parliament can be reconvened, there is a constitutional issue that will arise if it's not. We will support such an election, but we are opposed to this election.
ආණ්ඩුවට ඕන මුදල් පාස් කරන්න ඕන කොහොම සහයෝගය අපි දෙනවා කිය. හැබැයි මාරයාගේ මැතිවරණට අපි විරුද්ධයි. ඒ විතරක් නෙමේ සෞඛ්‍ය ඇමතිවරිය හරිනම් ඉල්ලා අස්සෙන්න ඕනේ.
Not only that, if the correct procedure is followed, the health minister should resign. She said that they can contain this coronavirus by the 19th and go for an election, saying that they will win the election.
මේ මැතිවරණයෙන් අපි දිනනවා කියලා එදා කතා කරනවා. අද
මැතිවරණයක් කරන්න එපා මේ රටේ ඇතිවෙච්ච වසංගතය.
Have an election, but after overcoming the pandemic in the country. The government is trying to create a paradise from the pandemic. There are doctors saying now that there is a shortage in medicines. At this time, Parliament should be convened to discuss and debate ideas and pass laws to govern the country.
ඊළඟට පුද්ගලිකංශයේ ලක්ෂ 15ක් විතර ජනතාවගේ රැකියාව වලින් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් දල වශයෙන් ලක්ෂ 5ක් විතර රැකියා නැත්.
Around 500,000 jobs in the private sector will be lost. I don't understand why the government doesn't direct resources to these issues. So we clearly ask that this election be postponed. Leave 28 days from the day health authorities announced Sri Lanka as COVID-free. Hold the election a further 28 days after that period and use it as a self-quarantine period. Protect the constitution.
තව දවස් 28ක් සොයන් නිරෝධායන රටක් බවට පත් වුණායින් පස්සේ මැතිවරණය තියන්න කිසිම ගැටලුවක් නැහැ.
දැන් අර චන්න ජයසුමන කොන්ත්‍රාත්කාරයා කොහමද?
Now how about the contract man Channa Jayasumana? When Shafi's issue came about in Kurunegala, he made such a big noise about it. Now they are taking on the election virus. Some are attacking Professor Hool. The poor too is anyway racist. Channa Jayasumana has started the second act after Kurunegala. Whether they convene the old parliament or not, that is not our issue. However, don't underestimate the powers vested in the Elections Commission of this country. Stop doing so and pressurizing the members of this commission.
ඒක අඩු තක්සේරුවට දාලා ඔතන ඉන්න කොමිසමේ මේ තුන් දෙනාට බලපෑම් ගේන එක වහම නවත්තන්න.
Chairman of the National Election Commission Mahinda Deshapriya and its member Professor Ratnajeevan Hool spoke about the election that is scheduled to be held on the 20th of June.
How did the Election Commission come to an agreement on the date for the parliamentary election?
All three members agreed no division and three of us signed the gazette. But for that we had very long discussion. We have several opinions.
It was a unanimous decision. All three agreed that the 20th of June should be the poll date. But that's not where we started because each of us has different views. One person wanted May, one person wanted as late as possible. In fact, I wanted September. Then we discussed and we generally agreed that June 2nd doing elections so that Parliament can meet by the 2nd of June is impossible. It was a situation where we were given a problem for which there is no solution. The final argument was that curfews will be lifted on the 27th of April. We would take a few days to determine if the corona thing is getting worse or better, and if it is getting better, we would give 7 weeks for campaigning, and that brought us to June 20th.
Does the National Election Commission have the final say in fixing a date for the parliamentary election?
Yes, we have. We have to. We shall announce the date. Because section 24(3) says we can postpone the election, but we have to gazette the date. That's why we gazette. We can't postpone this indefinitely. If not, the President can announce the date under the section 113 of the Act. So we have to. That is our duty.
Yes and no. Because according to the Act, Parliamentary Elections Act, it's the President who fixes a date. So we implement that date. And so he fixed the 25th of April. But it turns out to be an impossible date. We are allowed to postpone elections in case there is an emergency. And this is an emergency.
In practice, are each of the commission members equal in their responsibilities? Or is there anyone who has a greater responsibility?
No one is as greater. Each member equal. The only thing is chairman has a deciding vote if there is any tie. But I have to say, in these last 4.5 years, as a chairman, I have not used that power any time. All the time in our commission, we got most of the decision without any division. There were, I think, less than 5 decisions we have taken. And for the allowance and the transport facilities, I am getting more.
All three are equal, except that when there is a tie, the chairman has an extra vote. But with 3 people, it's extremely unlikely that there can be a tie. So even that extra vote is meaningless. Decisions have been taken without all 3 being present. These were illegal decisions, and it doesn't reflect well on the Election Commission.
Is there a constitutional provision to hold the parliamentary election on a staggered basis?
There is no rule to say we can't do that. And there is no rule we can do that. But there is a provision called 129. If there is any special situation, commissioner or those days, a commission can decide, make rules and regulation and do whatever. We have not give green light or red light for this opinion. We will give the amber light because at that meeting Professor Wool was not there. If we have the staggered election, after the last election day, we have to start all together and announcing result like one-day election.
Parliamentary Elections Act, it says the President shall in his proclamation specify the date, singular, the date on which the poll shall be taken. So that seems to imply that it should be on the same day. Later on in section 24, it says when due to an emergency or unforeseen circumstance, the poll for the election in any electoral district cannot be taken on the day specified in the notice by the President. The Commission may, by order published in the Gazette, appoint another day. So it's not constitutional, but it's a statutory provision. Okay. I mean, so far this has been used only when there is a flood or a riot or something in one district.
Is there an obstruction in reconvening the parliament, which the President dissolved on the 2nd of March 2020?
A very simple answer for that. 2 words. No comments.
There is no obstruction because the President is the one who issued the Gazette of March 2nd, and under the law, the interpretation ordinance, the person who issues an order has the power to withdraw that order. So the President can indeed withdraw that Gazette, and if he withdraws the Gazette, we will be at status quo ante. That is where we started. Parliament will be back in session, there will be no election scheduled, and then if things get better, the President can again issue a similar Gazette, dissolve Parliament again, and then call for new elections, or he can wait for the end of Parliament in August. If no one does anything, it will be violated, but there are things that people can do to prevent that violation.
Professor Ratnajivan Hool is an experienced civil servant. You have some regard for his experience and knowledge in the profession.
He is a professional, highly qualified engineering professional, and he is a university professor. He is the only person in Sri Lanka, I think, having DSc, Doctor of Science. He has done electrical engineering. He is a highly educated person.
Mr. Mahinda Deshapriya, the chairman of the Election Commission, is an experienced civil servant. He has more than 30 years of experience. Surely, you have some regard to his experience and knowledge in the election management process.
He is someone who is very sympathetic to minorities. It's because of him that the Tamil language is used at the Election Commission very widely. Every memo is translated and given to me in Tamil. I do not speak Sinhalese, and in that sense, the translators he has brought in, it's a multicultural organization holding up the highest ideals of participatory governance.
Tune in to our sister channel Sirsa TV at 10:30 p.m. on Sunday, the 26th of April, to watch the full interview of Chairman of the National Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapriya, and the Member of the National Election Commission, Professor Ratnajeevan Hool. We're now crossing over for a short commercial break. Stay tuned for more after this. Welcome back to the news. Several people were affected as a result of the adverse weather conditions experienced in certain parts of the country.
This was the situation in the Alimudukku area in Kandy, which received heavy rains last night. Our correspondent reported that 30 shops have been submerged due to floods. These residents have been struck by a double whammy, first by the pandemic and now by the floods. The Galha area was also severely affected as a result of the heavy rains and winds experienced in the area. Our correspondent reported that 30 houses had been damaged due to this situation. The region of Kandy experienced heavy rains and winds since 7 p.m. yesterday. As a result, trees had fallen across the Galha road. At least 50 families have been affected due to a tree falling onto a power line, causing a power cut in the area.
ලොකු වැස්සක් ආවා. වැස්සත් එක උලන් වෙනකොට එක එක ගා වැටෙනවා පස්සේ බොක්කම තට උලන් වැටෙනවා.
එතකොට අම්මගේ ඇඟ උඩ වැටෙන්න මේ පොඩි ළමයි තියාගෙන හිටියා මේ ගස් ඔක්කොම වැටලා මේ අර මොකද මේ කොස්කෙඩිය ඔක්කොම මේ බිම මේ බලන්න මේ ළමයි ඔක්කොම බය වෙලා හිටියා අපි මොනවද වෙයිද මොනවද ඊට පස්සේ අපි නිදා ගන්නවත් ඉඩ නැහැ.
Power supply to around 3,000 houses had been disrupted as a result of heavy winds and rains in Kurunegala. Our correspondent reported that trees had fallen onto power lines along the Kurunegala-Kandy main road. Residents stated heavy winds were experienced for around an hour in the midst of heavy showers. Our correspondent also reported that employees attached to the Kurunegala Municipal Council had taken steps to remove the trees from the road. Power had been restored in the area by this morning. Meanwhile, more than 10 houses in the Grama Niladhari divisions of Pugalla, Kalugamuwa and Yantampala, which fall under the Veerambugedara Divisional Secretariat in Kurunegala, have also been damaged due to heavy rains. The house which you see behind me has also been damaged. The people of this house had to seek shelter at their neighbours' residence as a result of this situation. If the rains continue, they will not have a place to go. We were able to meet several families facing similar difficulties in the area. Our correspondent reported that officials attached to the Disaster Management Centre had inspected the situation in several areas.
The Department of Meteorology said that there are increased odds of the rainy weather prevailing in the country becoming more frequent following the 26th of this month.
Intermonsoonal weather patterns are being witnessed across the island these days. Therefore, there is a great chance that today and in the coming days we may see rain accompanied by thunder and lightning. There are high chances of this happening in a number of areas across the country after 2 p.m. today. This is especially true to the central, Sabaragamuwa, western, Wayamba and southern provinces. In some places, there can be rains of more than 100 millimeters. The Disaster Management Centre expressed these views on the possibility of the country having to face a flood in the midst of battling the coronavirus pandemic at a press briefing held today. We will have to face a big disaster. From May, there will be extremely heavy rains. We are already making plans for the potential deluge. We have already begun work in areas such as Colombo, Kalutara, Gaul, Matara, Putlam, Kegol and Kandy. In every district, we will always put in place quarantine centres in addition to the camps if there are situations where those in self-quarantine are to be rescued. We plan to take on hotels and host those who are in great difficulty. We will speak to hotel management and arrange those accordingly when the need arises. For all things we can be prepared in advance for, we will take the steps to be prepared. When the dengue menace raises its head, then too we will have a lot of work. For that, we will speak to health authorities, divisional secretaries, district agents and Grama Niladhari officers and do a great deal of work.
රාජ්‍ය ලේකම්වරුන් දිසාපතිවරුන් විශේෂයෙන්ම ග්‍රාම නිලධාරීවරුන් සමග අපිට විශාල කටයුත්තක් කරන්න තියෙන මේ ඩෙන්ගු උදුරු සම්බන්ධවත්.
Although most Sri Lankans have been forced indoors, there are some who roam around in forest reserves illegally while laying traps in the process. An unfortunate incident was reported today where a leopard was caught in a trap set by such a group of people. Now this is the second such incident reported over the past few days.
This leopard, which was caught in a trap set up to hunt wild boars in Darawalavatta, Dikkoya, was rescued by wildlife officers and was transported to the veterinary office in Minipe. Meanwhile, an elephant which had fallen into an agrarian well in Ratmalgahawewa, Galkiriagama, was rescued by officers attached to the Galkiriagama Wildlife Office. The elephant was later chased away towards the Pallekale Reserve in Kahalla.
ගුඩට ආමන අලියා පළවා හැරුණේ කහල්ල පල්ලකැලේ රක්ෂිත
158 lawyers, including a former Supreme Court judge and 6 president counsels, have written to the Bar Association of Sri Lanka regarding the recent arrest of attorney-at-law Hijaz Hizbullah.
The lawyers' letter called on the Bar Association to take swift, effective and meaningful action during instances in which the legal guarantees of its members are denied. The letter, which was signed by 6 President's Councils, including former Supreme Court Judge Salim Marsouf, pointed out that the reason for the lawyers' arrest has not been provided yet, although 8 days have passed. The letter read, quote, "This violates the basic constitutional shield from being arrested except according to procedure established by law and the right to be informed of the reason for the arrest," unquote. It went on to note that the arrested lawyer has not been produced before a magistrate yet. The lawyer said, quote, "Most alarmingly, Mr. Hizbullah has been denied access to his family and even lawyers, except for a brief 15 minutes with an attorney-at-law under scrutiny of an eavesdropping CID officer," unquote. Accordingly, they stated that the legal right of the arrested lawyer to have access to relatives and legal representation has been violated. The lawyers urged for immediate action to remedy this situation and to restore confidence in the ability of legal professionals by having access to their clients without being obstructed by police officers or any other authorities.
The World Bank, in its April Commodity Markets Outlook, said the global economic shock of the COVID-19 pandemic has driven most commodity prices down and is expected to result in substantially lower prices over 2020.
Energy and metal commodities are the most affected by the sudden stop to economic activity and the serious global shutdown that is anticipated. Monthly average crude oil prices plunged 50% between January and March. Prices reached a historic low this week, with some benchmarks trading at negative levels. Oil prices are expected to average $35 per barrel in 2020. As of this evening, oil prices still traded lower than $20 per barrel. Agriculture prices saw only minor decline in the first quarter of 2020, and prices are expected to remain broadly stable in 2020 overall, as production levels and stocks of most staple foods are at record highs. The World Bank warns that despite only moderate impact on the outlook for most agriculture commodities, stock chain distributions and government steps to restrict exports or stockpile commodities raise concerns that food security may be at risk in places. The World Bank urged policymakers to take advantage of lower oil prices by undertaking energy subsidy reforms to help freeze spending for urgent pandemic-related purposes. These reforms need to be complemented with stronger social safety nets to protect the most vulnerable segments of society. Policymakers must resist the urge to impose trade restrictions and actions that put food security at risk, as the poor would be hit the hardest.
On to more news on how COVID-19 is affecting the global economy. The World Bank predicts remittances to Sri Lanka this year will decline by 19%, driven by the global economic slowdown and declining oil prices. Remittances to South Asia are projected to decline by 22% in 2020, while global remittances are projected to decline sharply by about 20% this year. The projected fall, which would be the sharpest decline in recent history, is largely due to a fall in the wages and employment of migrant workers, who tend to be more vulnerable to loss of employment and wages during an economic crisis in a host country.
In 2019, the Sri Lankan economy received $6.7 billion as remittances, which was capable of covering 84% of the trade deficit. Moreover, recent estimates show that 1 in every 11 households receive international remittances, and migrants normally remit once a month, and the average amount of remittances is about 40,000 Sri Lankan rupees per month. During the 5-year period from 2015 to 2019, on average, March has brought in about $633 million as remittances. Adding fire to the flame, the rift between Saudi Arabia and Russia over the supply of oil in the wake of declining demand for oil in the world market has resulted in a huge fall in oil prices since early March. Together with other issues related to COVID-19 in countries of destination, the impending global recession means less stability and job security for Sri Lankan origin migrant workers who, under normal circumstances, would remit regularly.
According to a report from the World Bank, remittances to South Asia are projected to decline by 22% to $109 billion in 2020, following the growth of 6.1% in 2019. The deceleration in remittances to the South Asian region in 2020 is also driven by the decline in global oil prices. Remittances to low and middle income countries are projected to fall by 19.7% to $445 billion, representing a loss of crucial financing lifeline for many vulnerable households. Remittance flows are expecting to fall across all World Bank Group regions, most notably in Europe and Central Asia, with a 27.5% decline, followed by Sub-Saharan Africa with a 23.1% decline, South Asia with a 22.1% decline, the Middle East and North Africa with a 19.6% decline, Latin America and the Caribbean with a 19.3% decline, and East Asia and the Pacific with a 13% decline. Foreign Secretary Ravinath Arya Singh has said that even as the Foreign Ministry was preoccupied with endeavouring to mitigate a multitude of problems faced by overseas Sri Lankans, it was parallelly seeking to reposition Sri Lanka's exports in the context of market conditions that have arisen as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
He said if this was successful, Sri Lanka would emerge one step ahead in the global supply chain in a post-COVID-19 world. Issuing a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Relations said it is noted that the ministry, together with the Export Development Board and Sri Lanka missions abroad, are continuing to explore access for Sri Lankan products into new markets. The statement added that the ministry is also working with the Sri Lanka Tea Board in expediting the process of authentication of export documents in respect of tea consignments to various destinations in Middle East and Turkey, as well as several other products. The statement further noted that the ministry is also supplying Sri Lanka tourism in the facilitation required for over 12,000 foreign tourists who have chosen to remain in Sri Lanka despite the present COVID-19 pandemic and the prevailing curfews in many parts of the country. This includes over 4,000 tourists from Western countries, notwithstanding the continuation of commercial as well as charter flights to return home. Visas for tourists in Sri Lanka were automatically extended in the face of the crisis situation up to the 12th of May 2020.
The government has printed 7.87 billion rupees during the week, central bank data showed on Friday. The central bank has printed approximately 213 billion rupees since the first week of March this year, with the start of the COVID-19 outbreak in Sri Lanka. The central bank holdings of government securities, which stood at 78.01 billion as at the 12th of March this year, now stands at 291.83 billion rupees as of Friday, April 24th, that is today. Now, according to the central bank statistics, since the beginning of this year, the CBSL has pumped 217.1 billion rupees. On to some more local news. Yesterday, the Colombo Grand Mosque announced fasting for the holy month of Ramadan, which will commence tomorrow, that is the 25th of April, as the new moon was not sighted. Thereby, Muslim devotees around the country and the globe will fast for 30 days until Eid al-Fitr, that is the Ramazan festival day. And that's a wrap of Primetime News for tonight. I'm Zeenat Musafir, and our news interpreter today is Tarika Gabriel. We leave you tonight with the Gammed, the Nagitimu Sri Lanka theme song. Good night and take care.
අත්දැල් ඇටගෙන ශ්‍රී ලංකාව මුළු ලෝකෙම බබලවන්න නැගිටින ශ්‍රී ලංකා නැගිටින ශ්‍රී ලංකා මාറ്റம் காணாத மனித பண்புகள் சிந்திடும் ශ්‍රී லங்கா வசந்தாய் another a bright Sri Lanka's
Gammadda Nagitimu Sri Lanka.